Welcome. You're listening to The Best of Investing. I'm your host, Edward Brown. Our phone number is 888-912-1190. Use that number to answer the trivia questions for a 5-pack tanning certificate given away during this show. That certificate's not sponsored by the radio station, but by Tan Bella Tanning Salon with 2 locations in San Francisco and 1 in Marin. Today's trivia theme is general trivia. Today, we do have a special guest, Anderson Franco. And he is recognized as one of the best San Francisco personal injury lawyers. Anderson is committed to securing fair compensation for personal injury victims and helping business protect themselves against injured workers or patrons. With a deep understanding of personal injury, business, and workers' compensation matters, Anderson's expertise empowers him to guide clients through complex legal challenges. Anderson, welcome to The Best of Investing. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Oh, great. Yeah, this is we've had other attorneys on, mostly talking about real estate. So this will be kind of interesting, talking about personal injury and insurance and all that. So yeah, it's funny because I literally can think of a couple of cases that we were involved with as a company, aside from radio show. But we'll start it. Okay, so give us the lowdown on what personal injury law is and how does it apply to everyday situations for regular individuals and businesses?
Yeah, sure. So to give you a little bit of background,
Yep.
so I'm a practicing attorney in California. I spent the majority of my career defending businesses such as restaurants, hotels, apartment complexes. And then more recently, in the last couple of years, I switched over to the plaintiff side where I'm the one initiating lawsuits. So through my career path, I've learned the in and outs of how businesses can protect themselves and from lawsuits. There's a lot of businesses they're exposed to liability, so it's important to have the proper insurance, the proper defenses. So happy to get into that.
So it's interesting because right away I'm thinking about a restaurant that I know of. I did not care for the operator of it. And it was a case that was brought in Marin, I guess maybe 5 years ago or so. It was a seafood restaurant. And this guy, patron, had chipped a tooth on a clam. So he brought a lawsuit against the proprietor. And I read about this lawsuit and I'm thinking, even though I don't like the proprietor, I thought, come on. I mean, clams, I mean, that's just the risk of eating that kind of food, right? And sure enough, the judge agreed with me, which, protected the proprietor. Because, can you imagine again, with your experience, I'm sure you've seen all kinds of cases.
I've seen all types of cases that have merit and cases that don't have merit. But in that situation, often what happens is the business just turns the lawsuit over to insurance. Usually it's a business owner's policy or general liability policy. And that's why it's important to have the proper coverage. So
there's a risk to that, though, because the insurance company can either drop you or raise your premiums like crazy, right?
Right. That's always the risk of whether you should hire your own attorney, which is costly, hiring your own private attorney to defend yourself, or even to just try to settle the case. For example, the one that you just mentioned, I imagine the damages weren't that extraordinary. I imagine just a dental bill.
Yeah.
In that situation, that is when you want to consider whether it's worthwhile to just pay to settle early, even though it would be initially cheaper if you turn it over to your insurance company. You just have to pay the deductible, but considering that they can increase your premiums in the future, then you got to weigh out your options in those situations.
We had a situation at this campground resort that I was involved with, where the head maintenance manager decided that he was going to quit and he was going to sue our company because he said that he never got a lunch break, never, in like 3 years that he worked there. And it's strange because he was the manager of the maintenance crew and could take breaks anytime he wanted. And we actually had pictures of him eating lunch at one of the, our general manager decided to just feed everybody. And we have pictures of a little party where he's eating during lunch. So she decided to not turn it over to insurance and not hire an attorney. And she went to the labor board, which is hard to fight in labor. That's a tough one to win.
It is.
Yeah,
And that's why I always, on the defense, I always tell my clients to document everything, have written
yeah.
procedures, have everything in writing when an employee checks in, checks out. Having written policies, a lot of employers don't have that, so that's necessary.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to cut to our first commercial break here. The first trivia question is, what key is to the right of the letter T on a standard keyboard? No looking at your keyboard there, Anderson. Or audience, you have to guess this one. Call 888-912-1190. The first caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate, which, by the way, is worth over $100. So again, here's the trivia question. What key is to the right of T on a standard keyboard? Stay with us. You're listening to The Best of Investing. Don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to The Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Anderson Franco. Our first trivia question. We're talking about basically a typewriter or a keyboard. What key is to the right of the T on a standard keyboard? Now you're going to have to look at Go ahead, Anderson. You can tell us.
The answer is Y.
The Y, the letter Y. Why is that? Yes, that's very good. I want to make a mention here for Palio Restaurant in San Francisco, voted by San Franciscans as one of the best restaurants in San Francisco. So when the hometown people say that you're the best, you got to be the best. Check them out at Palio Restaurant. That's Palio Restaurant in San Francisco. All right, so we're talking personal injury. What other legal defenses do you do besides personal injury?
A lot of landlord tenants. So I've represented a lot of
Okay.
apartment complexes, hotels. It's tenants suing for a variety of reasons, habitability, wrongful eviction, and employment claims that go along with hotel management and apartment complex employees, that sort of thing.
Well, the way it is in California, it's almost like only non-payment of rent is practically the only way you can get rid of somebody, isn't it?
Right. California has a lot of protections, but particularly in the Bay Area, landlord tenant laws vary county specific and even city specific. For example, the laws in San Francisco are different from the ones in Oakland or in Marin County. So it's a very localized area of law, which is why there's a lot of lawsuits, because a lot of property owners or investors have properties in different counties, different cities, and they assume all properties in California, for example, have the same laws when it's not necessarily true.
Is San Francisco more liberal or Alameda County?
San Francisco has more stringent laws. They have stronger protections for tenants.
Yeah.
Also, San Francisco has more organizations that provide resources to tenants.
Yeah, which, obviously, nobody wants to get thrown out on the street, but it's amazing how many tenants really take advantage of the situation. And, this whole idea about rent control, and we've talked about this before in the show, it's a very dangerous, slippery slope, because if you have, I actually knew of a client of mine 40 years ago who had just stayed in her apartment, and she was paying, I think, $300 a month for something that should have been over $3,000 a month. And it's good for her, but guess what? PG&E didn't stay the same. Neither did plumbing and other, fixing the roof and all that. And so, when I tell people, I say, don't just get so excited about rent control, because your landlord at some point may not even be able to afford to fix things.
Right. And one thing I've noticed with the long-term tenants in rent-controlled units, at least from the property owner's perspective, tenants, especially in the Bay Area, can take advantage of their long-term tenancy and threaten suit, because anything could be considered an attempt at a wrongful eviction. For example, a long-term tenant who asks for the roof to be repaired, if it's just delayed a little bit, that could be construed as attempting to coerce them out of their unit. So those are a lot of the lawsuits that I've been involved in, where
Gotcha.
it's where if it's a tenant of a year or so, it wouldn't be considered trying to force them out, but it's more because they're paying so much less then there's an incentive there for a property owner to oust the tenant.
And I can just imagine how many tenants are subletting the apartment.
Right,
Trying to get
and
away
that's
with that. Yeah.
right, and that's another issue. Sometimes you have tenants who don't live in the unit at all and vacated completely, but
Yeah.
they rent it out to their friends and they actually profit from it.
Yeah.
So so I've seen a lot of that go on
Oh,
in the Bay
bad.
Area.
Okay. Um, how do personal injury cases impact businesses, especially smaller ones? And what can they do to avoid legal issues?
So a lot of businesses, a lot need the proper protections to avoid liability. So the classic example is when a floor is wet, we often see these cones of wet, slippery when wet. So what a business has a duty is to provide notice of a hazard.
Okay.
So that's important. But really, I think an important thing that all businesses should consider is insurance, and having the proper insurance, having the proper liability limits. For example, going back to landlord tenants, a lot of policies that are for apartment complexes have exclusions in them. For example, it could be a habitability exclusion, where if you have an apartment complex and a tenant sues you because of mold or because of lack of repairs, a lot of policies have exclusions against that,
Oh,
in which
yeah.
case the property owner is not protected. And that's why it's necessary to talk to your insurance agent, figure out what the exclusions are, and figure out what kind of protections you need.
Yeah, also, I can imagine there's certain things that the landlord tries to do to mitigate. Like, let's say they have a bunch of trees and they're constantly trimming them, but a storm comes and a limb breaks off and crashes into a car, or into the tenant's unit or something like that. And it's like, well, they try to do the best they can, but acts of God. Tell you what, we have to go to another commercial break here. We'll come back with that. We're talking general trivia here. What board games tokens include a rope, a lead pipe, and a candlestick? What board games tokens include a rope, a lead pipe, and a candlestick? Call 888-912-1190. First caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate. And don't touch that dial, because the best of investing will be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing one more time. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, attorney Anderson Franco. And here's the trivia question. What board games tokens include a rope, a lead pipe, and a candlestick?
That's
Answer?
Clue.
Clue, that's right. And the clue was Colonel Mustard in the library. That is correct. I want to make a quick mention here also for Mountain Mike's Pizza in San Rafael. Pizza the way it ought to be. Every time I do that, every time I give that shout out, I can just taste the mozzarella cheese. I mean, they make really good pizza. Check them out, Mountain Mike's Pizza in San Rafael. All right, so Anderson, we're talking legal issues here, personal injury and that sort of thing. So what types of insurance are crucial for businesses to protect against personal injury lawsuits, and how should they choose the right coverage?
So we went over a couple of business owners policy and general
Yeah.
liability, but the one I wanted to point out in particular is workers' compensation insurance. One area that I see a lot of people don't know about is if just homeowners, if you invite someone to your property to, for example, cut down a tree, and that person falls while cutting down a tree. If
Yeah.
that business does not have workers' compensation insurance, then under California law, you are the employer of that person who fell, and you are subject to the workers' compensation laws, which means you're going to be on the hook for that. So that's an area of workers' compensation where I most see common amongst homeowners is maintenance workers getting injured on their own property. So what I recommend is hire a reputable company, make certain that they have workers' compensation insurance, and it's not just a matter of taking them at their word, but request the actual policy or declaration that shows proof of insurance.
That is great advice. I mean, I actually know of somebody who got hit by that, and someone took advantage of it, and it cost like $50,000. But one of the problems is that the companies that do hire that have the workers' comp insurance, because especially tree compensation or workers' comp, I got to think the price of the employees' wages probably increased 40%. And so, something that normally would cost $1,000 might cost $2,000 or more to get a tree taken out or trimmed or whatever. Isn't that about the case?
You're definitely right. So if you notice, if you take for, let's say, if cutting the tree, if you request different proposals from different companies, you'll notice that there's always some proposals that are pretty low and like around the same level, and then ones that are more costly. It's clear that the ones that are more costly have that insurance, and that's why they charge you more, because they pass on the cost to the customer.
And I got to say, the fraud that goes on in workers' comp. We always hear, we watch old TV shows and someone puts in a claim for something, and then they're out dancing around, and that stuff's easy. But you get situations. The thing that gets kind of gnarly is I've seen situations where the workers' comp, state workers' comp, has, they have different categories, right? And yeah, okay, if you're a tree trimmer, that's probably one of the more dangerous occupations. Sitting in an office behind a computer is not so dangerous, but because the bathroom is outside another building, workers' compensation basically said, nope, that's just as dangerous as being in the trees.
It's a hazard, a work hazard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think for companies like that, what they need to do is have like an indoor outhouse, or a toilet thing inside the office. Maybe that's a good answer. Don't leave your desk at all. Well, in fact, we'll stick a catheter in you. That's the only way. Yeah, I've seen this kind of stuff before. It just drives me bananas. And we had a situation where this one lady, nobody saw it happen. She claimed she fell as a cleaning person, fell off a chair because she was cleaning a shower, and suddenly, someone who makes minimum wage collected $175,000 from workers' comp. And the thing is, you can't fight it unless you actually can prove, hey, we have it on videotape and it's fraud. How do you fight workers' comp?
Right. And what those claims do is they increase the workers' comp premiums that employers have to pay. But going back to the original statement, which is that's why it's necessary to have workers' compensation insurance, because it's helpful to, regardless of the claim, whether it's valid or not, it's helpful to be able to turn it over to insurance company and let them handle it and figure it out. Even though
and it is a law in California, I think you have to have it. I mean, it's not something you can opt out of.
Right. So the law in California is every employer needs to have workers' compensation insurance. The way it works is if an employer does not have workers' compensation insurance, California, the state steps in and provides those benefits to the injured worker, but then the state comes back to you and issues fines and requests reimbursement.
And without endorsing any company, do you find that the state workers' compensation is, forget the fact that coming after you, if the employer is proactive in getting it, are they usually better than the private companies?
The state is generally not better than the private companies. The state is usually it's government employees. It's slower.
No, I mean the cost, the premium.
Oh, the cost. Oh, you only could go through private insurance, not through the state. Because the state steps in when the employer does not have insurance.
No, but I mean, an employer can buy insurance from state workers' compensation.
Right. So you're talking about SCIF. Yes. In my experience, the private insurers are better than state.
Really? That's cheaper, huh? Interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. That's good to know. All right. We're going to get this. I tell you, it goes fast here at the Best of Investing. All right, our third trivia question here. The soft drink Mr. Pibb was introduced as a competitor to which popular soft drink? So Mr. Pibb was introduced as a competitor to which popular soft drink? Call 888-912-1190. First caller with the correct answer wins a tanning certificate, which is worth over $100. Stay with us. The Best of Investing. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, along with Anderson Franco, our guest. And our guest knows the answer. He answered this off the air, but now he's going to answer on the air. So the soft drink Mr. Pibb was introduced as a competitor to which popular soft drink?
It's Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper, that is correct. I want to make a mention here also for the Tahoe Lakeshore Lodge. They have a couple 100 feet of lakeshore beach. It's a beautiful place. I've had a few people call me that who have gone there and said it's an absolutely fantastic place to go. It's called the Tahoe Lakeshore Lodge in Lake Tahoe. Check them out. All right. So Anderson, we're talking our favorite topic, legal and insurance together. Okay. Let's see here. So what is the process of hiring a personal injury attorney? And when is it advisable to seek legal representation for a personal injury case?
Early is always advisable. Both if you get notice of a lawsuit or if you're going to sue, you should retain an attorney early on. And the reason is if you're going to be sued, you want to start gathering information and documents and witnesses as early as you can.
Yeah.
And to decide whether you're going to turn it over to your own insurance or
Mhm.
hire your own private attorney. So the process of retaining an attorney, I always recommend word of mouth, reach out to someone who's in the legal profession and ask for recommendations. Because in law, it's very niche practices. Everyone's specialized, and if you're being sued for a landlord-tenant matter, there's no reason to get an employment attorney. So first, get the right attorney,
Good point.
and early on, figure out: do you want to hire your own attorney, or do you want to go through insurance? And then also gather the information you need to be able to
Yeah, because
advocate.
sometimes the insurance companies, if you don't can it to them right away, that'll be one of those things that they say exclusion. How often do you look at a case and you say, there's really no there, and I can't represent you, or I choose not to represent you?
As a plaintiff side personal injury attorney, I could tell you the far majority of the cases or the calls that I get, and that I cannot represent them, or it's not worthwhile to represent them. I do receive a fair amount of calls where it's not, there is no there.
Yeah.
There's or to pursue.
And you tell them, you go, are you kidding me? You're seriously calling me for this? No, I'm kidding.
Right.
I'm sure you want to at times.
Right. But for malpractice reasons, and because sometimes it's hard to get all of the details in a matter of during one conversation. So it's hard to be able to definitively say there's definitely not a lawsuit, but so that's why for malpractice reasons we avoid that.
Absolutely. And Anderson, before I forget, in case people are listening to the show and they say, you know what, I kind of need somebody like this, how would people get a hold of you?
Sure. My website's andersonfranco.com. I represent, my office is in San Francisco. I represent injured people throughout California, but particularly in the Bay Area.
Okay, good. No, good. What misconceptions about personal injury law should individuals and businesses be aware of?
So one, there is a notion that there's a litigious society where people do want to sue for anything. So I could tell you, or that there's ambulance chasers. What I could tell you is, at least for my practice, I don't do ambulance chasing. I only take on cases where there's significant injuries or significant merit to it. But also the unfortunate thing is there's bad apples on both sides, where I've seen defendants where they really did commit bad acts, or for example, property owners where they really were negligent. And on the other hand, kind of what we talked about earlier of fraudulent claims or false claims. So there's bad apples on both sides.
Yeah, I unfortunately have dealt with, I mean, fortunately on my side, I had insurance, but it still was terrible because even after the attorney on the other side realized that his client caused 100% of the damage and even acknowledged it, he still served a lawsuit. I mean, that's a bad apple, in my opinion.
That is unfortunate. Sometimes the calculus that goes into it is an attorney assumes if you file a lawsuit, it's going to be cheaper for the person to settle than to pay for an
Yeah.
attorney. And those are the terrible claims where some people make money out of it,
Yeah.
even though it's not the greatest
Now, I
look.
remember years ago hearing with insurance where they basically said, we think this case is worth, $10,000, whatever it is, and we're setting that aside. If you want the 10,000, you can take it now. Otherwise, every day that goes by that we have to spend money on this case, it'll drop to 8,000, and then 6,000, and then 3,000, and then you're going to be left with that. Is that still the
That
case?
that's definitely true. So I've represented insurance companies. Every insurance company has their own philosophy.
Of course. Yeah.
Some look at it more as from a business perspective of, even though a case is worth $10,000,
Yeah.
the legal fees are going to amount to 100,000, so they'd rather
Right.
offer 50,000.
Yeah.
So some look at it from that perspective. Other insurance companies do value and say it is $10,000, but we're spending money, so we're going to keep offering less. Kind of like what you
Yeah.
just. So there are different theories.
Yeah. And the one thing that's really tough is the malpractice cases for doctors. There was a friend of mine who was a plastic surgeon, and they had the most uh, insurance costs. I mean, it was literally the insurance premium. This was back in the early 90s. 250,000 was his insurance premium, and I think the deductible was 100 grand or whatever. And he says at some point it just gets too expensive. He was coming out of the army. He was a surgeon in the army. He was going to go into private practice. And he says, I can't afford to. I'm going to stay in the army. And it's because the malpractice cases, some of these juries are a little bit delusional, where yeah, let's stick it to the insurance company, and they don't realize that it all funnels back down to them.
It's that, but also malpractice in particular is a very expensive arena because both sides have to hire their own specialists to prove. And doctors, if it's expensive to hire a doctor to prove your case.
It is. I'll tell you what, we don't have another trivia question, but stay with us, because the best friend investor will be right back with some closing comments. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Anderson Franco. We didn't have a trivia question, but I do have a last question here for Anderson. How do personal injury cases usually get resolved, and what are the options for alternative dispute resolution?
That's a good question. So there's usually kind of three phases of when a case can get resolved. There's either it gets resolved before a lawsuit's actually filed in the courthouse. That's considered pre-litigation, or it can resolve during the course of litigation. And then lastly, it can be resolved by a judge or a jury. Those are the three typical phases. Often, whether it resolves in pre-litigation depends on whether the attorney even provides notice of the lawsuit before filing of the lawsuit. I would say the majority of cases attorneys do provide notice, and under those circumstances, that's when the business owner or the person being sued decides whether to hire their own attorney or turn it over to insurance, or deal with it on their own, actually, even without an attorney.
And do you charge for that for personal injury? Do you charge based on a contingency all the time, or some of the time? How do you work your fees?
All personal injury attorneys who I know charge just on contingency,
Contingency, okay.
and it's the contingency rate also follows kind of that model. Often it's a graduated contingency rate where it increases after filing a lawsuit. It increases during trial.
Is it typically a third? I mean,
Right.
on average,
It typically starts at about a third, and then it increases from there.
Yeah, because now even when you take a contingency, the plaintiff still has to pay like court costs out of pocket, right?
So the majority of personal injury attorneys cover the court costs.
Really? Okay.
Right.
So it really is no out of pocket costs for the plaintiff in that example.
Exactly. And because of that, as personal injury attorneys, we have to take on cases that have merit. Otherwise, we do risk being out of pocket for a lot of the costs. And these cases do add up. You have to hire not just the court costs, but also experts and deposition costs, or even hiring investigators.
Yeah. Well, I've been hired as an expert witness, but mostly for business, not for personal injury. So don't hire me for that. All I give you is my personal opinion rather than my expert opinion.
Right.
All right. One more time, give out your information.
So again, I'm Anderson Franco. I'm a personal injury attorney in the Bay Area. My website is andersonfranco.com.
Good. And Anderson was referred by a friend of mine. So you've got to be a good guy. I haven't used you yet. Hopefully you're one of those attorneys you never need. Sort of like, when
Exactly.
you go to the chiropractor and you hopefully you only have to go once, Well, the
Right,
best attorney
right.
you never want, right?
That's exactly what I tell my friends is I hope you don't need me, but or if you need me, I hope it's because you need a referral to an attorney, so I can at least point you to another friend in that
Oh, I
area.
like that. What's just we only have about 40 seconds here. What's the largest case you've worked on?
Uh, I've had cases of multi millions, like 50 million plus. I've had
Wow.
cases with 100 or 150 plaintiffs. So there's certain cases that end up being designated complex, and I've had cases with 50 different law firms involved.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh. Well, it's
yeah,
interesting because one of the cases I was an expert witness on, I was actually more of an expert consultant rather than an expert witness. It was the largest case that was judgment in history against a gun manufacturer for a defect. And I'm not anti-gun or anything like that. So my attitude, my thing was just working on the finances and trying to figure out where all the money went because they went into BK and all this kind of stuff. But okay, are you ready for our thoughts for the day? Here we go. So people used to laugh at me when I say, I want to be a comedian. Well, nobody's laughing now. And my wife is always stealing my t-shirts and sweaters. But if I take one of her dresses, suddenly we need to talk. I tell you. Tune in next week to The Best of Investing. We're going to be giving away more free prizes for answering trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing. So long.